ASMR. Hey everybody, today I am going to be reading 17 creepy real events that actually happened on Halloween, and then 8 creepy Halloween tales and traditions. I don't know if they're ghost stories or just weird stuff, but let's give it a shot. For some of us, October 31st is the most fun day of the year. For others, it's the spookiest, and here's why. Spooky happenings. If Halloween movies are any indication, bad things always happen on Halloween. That's just movie magic and the stuff of scary stories. You think Halloween is just like any other day, and most of the time that's very true. Halloween goes by without any creepy hitch or spine-chilling occurrences to be seen. Spooky vibes and moonlight nights are peak Halloween energy, sure, but it's just another day, right? Not in these 17 cases. Sometimes unexplainable, scary, or downright horrible things do happen on Halloween. Costumes, decorations, and fear all accumulate. Sorry, I had to really look at that word. In a melting pot of potential, which sometimes has disastrous consequences. If you're bummed that Halloween this year will be quite different, take a moment to read through these too incredible to be true stories of creepy events that actually took place on Halloween. Wrong place at the wrong time. In 1992, a 16-year-old Japanese foreign exchange student in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, paid the ultimate price after accidentally ringing the wrong doorbell on his way to a Halloween party, reports Japan Today. I will probably butcher this poor dude's name. Yoshihiro Hattori had been unfamiliar with the neighborhood when he and a friend arrived at the home of Rodney Pierre's, a nearby neighbor who opened the door armed with a .44 Magnum revolver. Although Hattori allegedly said, "We're here for the party," Pierre's claimed he feared for his life and ordered the student to freeze. When Hattori misunderstood the command and kept approaching, Pierre shot him. After being questioned, the perpetrator was arrested, but later acquitted of manslaughter. It's unknown what kind of Halloween costume Hattori wore to warrant such a reaction. That's really weird. Harry Houdini died after being punched by a college student. Famed magician Harry Houdini claimed he could take a blow to the abdomen without being taken down. And on October 22nd, 1926, a student at McGill University asked if he could prove it. Houdini, who had been sitting in his dressing room during an engagement at the Montreal University, obliged. Although he had allegedly braced himself, the student's 4 punches left the performer in great pain. After suffering for 2 days, Houdini decided to seek medical help, but by this time he was suffering from a severe fever and acute appendicitis. Defying doctor's orders, he performed instead of undergoing the recommended emergency surgery. When the curtains closed, the magician collapsed Despite having his appendix removed afterward, Houdini passed away on Halloween, surrounded by family. A deadly finale. On Halloween Day in 1963, the Indiana State Fair held a Holidays on Ice skating exhibition for a crowd of hundreds. The grand finale was not what anyone had expected. Unbeknownst to organizers at the Indiana State Fairgrounds Coliseum, propane gas had been leaking from a nearby tank into the poorly ventilated room. During a final act, called Mardi Gras, the propane gas caught on fire, leading to a horrific explosion that propelled onlookers from their chairs. The death toll was 74, and 400 additional people were injured. Take a break from this to see the petition on changing the date of Halloween that is gaining traction all over the nation. Alright, that actually wasn't part of the story. Clearly, they just want me to click a link. A prank gone wrong. The tradition of throwing eggs at people on Halloween is at best a harmless prank. At worst, it can turn deadly. That was the case of Carl Jackson, a 21-year-old data clerk at Morgan Stanley, who usually never left the house on Halloween, as he thought it was dangerous. On October 31st, 1995, his worst fear became a reality. Reports the New York Times. Jackson had decided to venture out to pick up his girlfriend's son from a party. Along the way, a group of teens pelted his car with eggs, so Jackson got out to confront them. But as he was getting back into the car, one of the pranksters pulled a gun and fatally shot him in the head. Vanished without a trace. To this day, no one knows what happened. To Hyun Jong Cindy Song, a 39-year-old grad student at Penn State University who disappeared without a trace after leaving a Halloween party after midnight in 2001. Song had stopped by a friend's home in the early morning hours, still decked out in her bunny costume, and accepted a lift home at about 4 a.m. Slightly intoxicated, she managed to get inside her home and drop off her belongings, including her backpack and cell phone. She'd even removed her false eyelashes. But Song herself was never seen again. Investigators found no evidence of foul play and no activity on her credit cards or cell phone. The case eventually went cold. You know, there's something about reading out loud, whether it's for these videos or like back when you were in school, that just, or at least for me, just makes me feel like I don't know how to read or something. Like, I can read perfectly. I love reading. But for some reason, when it comes time to read things out loud, especially if you haven't gone over them first, like you're reading them raw for the first time, it's so easy to stumble over things. A murder predicted by a serial killer. David Berkowitz. Here we go. David Berkowitz became famous in the 1970s as the Son of Sam serial killer. But not many people know that he could also predict the future. Well, sort of. Berkowitz was incarcerated when 39-year-old Ronald Zisman and a 20-year-old Elizabeth Platzman. I'm sorry if I butchered your names. That was probably a really bad choice of words. I'm sorry I messed up their names. If I did, were beaten and shot to death in their Manhattan home in the early morning hours of Halloween 1981. Boy, I botched that. I am so sorry. May they rest in peace. Reports the New York Times. A fellow prisoner claimed that the son of Sam had previously told him that a cult was planning to carry out just such a massacre. Berkowitz was allegedly even able to describe the victim's apartment to a T, but police didn't have enough evidence to charge him with involvement in the murders, which remain unsolved. Ugh. I know you're probably thinking, whatever, but I feel bad if I mess up the victims' names. And then it almost makes it, what I said almost makes it seem like it was a pun, and it was not. Just in bad taste. Let's see. The freakish. This freakish decoration was real. If there was a prize for most morbid Halloween decoration in Frederica, Delaware in 2005, it would have gone to the body hanging from a tree. It would have beaten out the fake witches, skeletons, and jack-o'-lanterns dotting the neighborhood. For hours, people passing by, admiring it. Of course, it had an edge over the other decorations. This was a real body. Police believe it was that of a woman who had committed suicide the night before. That's crazy morbid. Men in tutus shouldn't criticize. Note to self, not everyone's wearing a costume on Halloween. In 2012, in the early hours of the morning after Halloween, a tutu-clad Marine spotted a uniform-clad man in a wheelchair and thought the man's costume was a weak attempt at mocking the military, so he attacked him. As the Marine learned upon his arrest, the man's wardrobe was not a comment to our servicemen and women. He was in fact a disabled veteran. I don't know how you would make that sort of mistake. Like, there really are monsters. In every parent's nightmare, your child comes home from a night of trick-or-treating with spiked candy. One of the Halloween stories that helped propel this fear was the murder of Timothy O'Brien in 1974. The 8-year-old from Deer Park, Texas, died Halloween night after ingesting poison candy. Making this crime more horrific is the fact that the perpetrator was not a neighbor, but the boy's own father, who sought to cash in on his son's life insurance. Damn. You never hear that part. The most frightening thing about the graveyard kit an Oregon woman bought at Kmart. How do you guys say Oregon? Do you say Oregon? Do you say Oregon? Do you say Oregon? I probably say it in a way that annoys people. The most frightening thing about the graveyard kit that this woman in Oregon bought at Kmart in 2012, there's a train, was the note she found inside. It was written by a Chinese factory worker who claimed he and others were tortured and enslaved in a forced labor camp, making toys 15 hours a day with no pay or days off. He went on to plead for the letter to be forwarded to the World Human Rights Organization. The woman did just that, and the Chinese worker was freed when the camp was exposed months later. That's horrible. Neither rain, nor sleet, nor decomposing body. It's bad enough to have collapsed and died alone on your own porch steps. But adding insult to injury the morning after this 2012 Halloween tragedy, the mailman, assuming the body was an excellent Halloween decoration, sidestepped the deceased on his way to delivering the corpse's mail. I could totally see that happening, especially now when decorations are getting more and more realistic. Next time, go as a ghost. Sometimes, here comes the freaking train on the tracks. Sounds like it's gonna come into the house, doesn't it? Sometimes a costume is just too good. In 2012, a 9-year-old was wearing a black outfit and a black hat with a white tassel, and they were mistaken for a skunk by oh my god. They were mistaken for a skunk by a relative and shot. Thankfully, the 9-year-old survived. How was this 9-year-old like the size of a baby? That's one big skunk. What the heck? A killer costume. The year was 1957, Halloween night. A couple was getting ready for bed when the doorbell rang. It was late, but the husband answered the door, ready to dole out more candy. Instead, an adult wearing a mask shot him in the chest, killing him. Was it a trick-or-treater dissatisfied with the candy selection? Not quite. The murderer, it turns out, was the girlfriend of a woman who had had an affair with the murdered man's wife. The woman convinced her girlfriend to do away with the husband in order to have the wife for herself. Hangry much? Candy might be important, but it's certainly not worth your life. It was Halloween night, 2011, when a 55-year-old Chicago resident realized his candy bag was missing. He blamed a neighbor for the missing sweets and took his revenge to an extreme, stabbing her to death with several steak knives. A devastating prank. Halloween is known for both tricks and treats, but some pranks just go too far. In 1998, a Bronx man was in the car with his girlfriend to pick up her 9-year-old son from a Halloween party when a group of teens parents started egging the car. The man got out and an argument started. After he sat back down in the car, though, one of the teenagers shot him fatally in the head. A missing tot. On Halloween Day in 1955, Marilyn Damon went to a food fair on Long Island to do some shopping. She brought her children, 2-year-old Stephen and 7-month-old Pamela, with her. Telling Stephen to be good and watch his little sister, she left the children outside while she went into the store. She returned 10 minutes later to find that her children had disappeared, stroller and all. Pamela's baby stroller, with the unharmed 7-month-old inside, was found a short distance away. But Long Island police were never able to locate Stephen. What happened to him remains a mystery. God, that stuff really gets to you. Don't lose your head. People thinking dead bodies are Halloween decorations seems to be a gruesome trend in these Halloween stories. However, in 2017, the opposite actually happened. In mid-September, police in Greene County, Tennessee, received a panicked phone call from a man who believed there was a beheaded corpse in his neighbor's driveway. Police arrived on the scene only to find the owner of the home had actually just put up his creepy Halloween display a little early. Do not call 911 reporting a dead body, the police department's Facebook page wrote. Instead, congratulate the homeowner on a great display. I mean, better safe than sorry, right? Even if you end up looking stupid and your neighbor gets embarrassed. I mean, what if you didn't call? I mean, that seems like the perfect time for someone to murder someone and get away with it because people think, I don't know. Alright, that's the end of that. Now, let's see if I can get this next one to load. 8 creepy Halloween tales and traditions. A fear of vampires spawned by consumption. I've actually watched a bunch of little TV series and documentaries that talk about this type of thing. During the 19th century, the spread of tuberculosis. Let's try that again. The spread of tuberculosis or consumption claimed the lives of entire families in Rhode Island, Connecticut, Vermont, and other parts of New England. Before physicians were able to explain how infectious diseases were spread, hopeless villagers believed that some of those who perished from consumption preyed upon their living family members. This spurred a grim practice of digging up the dead and burning their internal organs. Why haunted houses opened during the Great Depression? In the period leading up to the Great Depression, Halloween had become a time when young men could blow off steam and cause mischief. Sometimes they went too far. In 1933, parents were outraged when hundreds of teenage boys flipped over cars, sawed off telephone poles, and engaged in other acts of vandalism across the country. Black Tuesday. Rather than banning the holiday, as some demanded, many communities began organizing Halloween activities and haunted houses to keep restless would-be pranksters occupied. Jack-o'-lanterns and the legend of Stingy Jack. An Irish myth about a man nicknamed Stingy Jack is believed to have led to the tradition of carving scary faces into gourds. What just happened to my voice? According to the legend, Jack tricks the devil into paying for his drink and then traps him in the form of a coin. The devil eventually takes revenge, and Stingy Jack ends up roaming Earth for eternity without a place in heaven or hell. Jack does, however, have a lighted coal which he places inside a carved turnip, creating the original jack-o'-lantern. Abraham Lincoln's ghost in the White House. For years, presidents, first ladies, guests, and members of the White House have claimed to have either seen Abraham Lincoln or felt his presence. Grace Coolidge, wife of Calvin Coolidge, the 30th president, was the first person to report having seen the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. She said he stood at a window of the Oval Office, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out over the, I don't know how to say this, Potomac, perhaps still seeing the bloody battlefields beyond. Spirit photography claims to capture ghosts on film. In the post-Civil War era, when many Americans were reeling from loss, a photographer named William Mumler claimed to capture ghosts on film. While taking self-portraits for practice, one of Mumler's prints came back with an unexplained aberration. Although he was quite alone in the room when the shot was taken, there appeared to be a figure at his side, a girl who was made of light. Mumler showed the picture to a spiritualist friend who told him the girl in the image was almost certainly a ghost. Mumler then began a swift business in so-called spirit photography. Irving writes the legend of Sleepy Hollow after fleeing yellow fever. Washington Irving's 1820 tale of a headless horseman who terrorizes the real-life village of Sleepy Hollow is considered one of America's first ghost stories and one of its scariest. Irving may have drawn inspiration for his story while a teenager in Tarrytown, New York. He moved to the area in 1798 to flee a yellow fever outbreak in New York City. Irving's story takes place in the New York village of Sleepy Hollow. A lanky newcomer and schoolmaster, Ichabod Crane, is chased by a headless horseman. In the tale, Irving weaves together actual locations and family names and a little bit of Revolutionary War history with pure imagination and fantasy. Horror movies inspired by real stories. On November 13th, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. murdered his entire family in their sleep. 1 year later, the Lutz family purchased the house in Amityville, New York, where the horror took place. George and Kathy Lutz then claimed they experienced shocking paranormal phenomenon in the house. Green slime oozing from the walls, a creature with red eyes, and multiple family members levitating in their beds. The claims appeared in Jay Anson's 1977 book, The Amityville Horror, which inspired the 1979 movie of the same name, which inspired many sequels. Now, whether you believe the Lutz family that moved in after the murders, whether you believe them or not, I think you could say that at least one actual horror took place, and that would be all the murders of that family. Why Mary Shelley carried her dead husband's heart. Frankenstein author Mary Shelley is world-renowned for her terrifying fiction, but few know that she had a dark secret of her own. Shelley's husband, Percy, drowned at the young age of 29 when his body was caught in a storm in July 1822. Percy's body and those of his fellow sailors were found dead 10 days later. Percy Shelley and the others were cremated, but Shelley's heart did not burn, perhaps due to a bout of tuberculosis earlier in his life. That's interesting. Mary Shelley eventually took ownership of her late husband's heart and is said to have carried it around in a silk bag. You know, some of these things that seem super creepy like that. I mean, I don't know. I guess you have to think about if you're in that position. I kind of don't want to think about being in that position. Okay, guys, I'm going to end this now because it's getting really long. And it's going to take me forever to edit. And all these trains and motorcycles and dogs are coming out. So